Rain polished the cobblestones of lower Manhattan into sheets of black glass. And Isabela II stepped from her carriage as if the street had been drawn for her alone. 27 and every inch at her peak, she wore beauty like a disciplined flame, a crimson cloak that refused to be ordinary, hair coiled with a strategist's patience, eyes that did not ask permission to see. Under the gas lamps, the city gave off steam and speculation. Brokers had shuttered early. The telegraph offices had not. A runner in a blue cap reached her with a gloved hand and a blood-red envelope. "From Pennsylvania," he panted. She broke the seal. 4 words leapt like sparks from wet embers. Mobilization, county militias. A thin figure at the alley's mouth clipped a wire with surgical calm. The lamps flickered, and the wires sang as if a nerve had been pinched. Someone was cutting the Union's senses, and the knife smelled faintly of oiled leather and sanctimony. She crossed into Chandler's Telegraph Exchange, where hot metal and ink thickened the air. Keys chattered. Clerks tapped panic into code. "Miss Isabela," the manager stammered. "Proclamations are flooding lines. Orders to arm, to seize depots. No federal seal, but people believe what prints first." She found the private room inside herself, where she stored the cost of being looked at and the habit of being listened to. "Copy every dispatch," she said. "Stamp the minute." "Anything without an accountable hand routes through me," she signed I deputsetum, the Roman numerals she had adopted half in jest, half as thesis. There had been an Isabela before her, and New York liked its dynasties almost as much as it liked its news. On Delancey Street, a vaudeville chorus pounded the stage while comics made jokes about senators fainting at telegrams. In the marbled boxes, Isabela II, older, composed, widow's gray, catching the light with a jet brooch braided from hair, waited as if calm were a profession. "Proclamations with no owner," she murmured when Isabela II slid beside her. "They intend to make the country run on echoes." "Then we will lend it a voice," the younger said. The fiddles rose, the audience roared, and in the roar, she added, "They're cutting wires." "Then we braid our own," Isabela II replied, "and we do not blink." Philadelphia put on its chandelier manners the next night. At the Armitage Founders' Ball, etiquette ruled like scripture. Men were buttoned to the throat. Women rustled like expensive weather. If New York was the mouth of the Republic, Philadelphia was its sternum. Hard, protective, slow to forgive. Julian Armitage, favored son of a railroad house as old as some temples, offered his arm with the ease of a man born to doors that open. "Half the room resents you for being brighter than they are," he murmured, smile warm, eyes cool. "The other half has forgotten how to breathe." "Then instruct them to choose oxygen," she said, and felt, against sense, the magnet in him. He wore charm like armor. When the orchestra paused and the gentlemen drifted to smoke, a clerk in a plain coat caught Isabela II by the back corridor, pressed a brass tube into her palm, and said, "Under a senator's cipher, miss." The slip inside called for militia to secure federal depots for the public peace. The signature line was blank, and the ink smelled like a lie. "We are late," Isabela II told Isabela I a moment later. The elder's peacock silk read less as vanity than as strategy. Mourning could be a weapon, and so could beauty used by a woman uninterested in forgiveness. "They mean to tip the country like a tea tray. Let gravity do the violence." Isabela II scanned the order. "Secession by suggestion," she said. "No flag to burn, no traitor's name to spit." Little tremors loosening foundations, she touched the hair brooch at her throat, a ritual of memory and discipline. "Have you told him?" "Julian?" Isabela II asked. He will have opinions. He will have interests, Isabela, I corrected. Men born with rails instead of spines tend to confuse the track for the destination. By dawn, the rumor had crossed the Alleghenies. In Chicago, the stockyards steamed. The lake cut the sky like a knife. A Union foreman read a broadsheet and saw only the word mobilize. Engines screamed. Clerks pressed stamps until red ink bled into their fingerprints. A photographer composed a family beside a child's coffin and asked them to hold perfectly still. The camera would pull grief into a keepsake. Newsboys shouted. Militiamen tested brass buttons. What if it was true? What if the Union could be unbuckled again? This time not by armies, but by clean-handed men who loved order and believed chaos was a ladder to it. To stop echoes from becoming commands, Isabela II built a nest of countersigns behind a milliner's on Chestnut Street. She staffed it with women who had learned telegraphy to feed brothers and refused to apologize for skill. May O'Rourke, reporter with Irish wit, coal stove stamina, and a temper for injustice, arrived with ink on her sleeves. Julia Finch, shy Baltimore mathematician who understood ciphers the way other people understood weather, arrived with a pencil sharpened to spite. Every proclamation routes through us, Isabela II said, chalking rules on a slate. We answer provocation with proof. They hummed. They drank cloudy tea. They put the city on a regimen of verification. Outside, gentlemen bellowed about propriety, while their secretaries carried envelopes that warmed the hand. And then came the first test of cause and effect. In Schuylkill County, a judge named Peckham received a telegram stamped with a counterfeit treasury mark. Arm County men, federal depots compromised. Keep coins safe locally, act without delay. Peckham hated disobedience the way he hated damp socks. He read, paled, and signed an order to a local colonel. Seize the depot. Meanwhile, a militia colonel on the Illinois prairie, Reed by name, got a similar wire and began to line up carbines in his sleep. The prairie takes news into itself and grows it. By the time the sun cleared the rail yard, Reed had hitched wagons and sent boys to rouse the farmers. Isabela II heard the echo at the milliner's before it became thunder. Julia, tapping a pattern only she could hear, said, "Not treasury." The counterfeiters didn't mimic the cadence. "The numbers in the date are prime, switch the line," Isabela II ordered. May yanked a patch panel like a woman pulling a rug that might hide a trapdoor. "Go," Isabela II told her, and sent a countersign to Peckham's court in a tone that could steady hands. "Judge, do not move. Validation pending. Arrest if necessary, requires federal seal. Marshal en route." A full minute later, she reached Colonel Reed via a rail station 2 towns east. "Colonel, stand down. Wire compromised. Hold position. Do not approach depot." Reed's reply came in staccato. "Who authorizes?" She sent her answer like a thrown lance. "The person who will stand in front of you if you disobey and make you explain to your wife why you fancied a war." He laughed, a clipped spark, and stood down. Peckham, tutting, rescinded the order with a pen stroke that pretended it had never existed. 2 fires went out before the match had time to feel important. Cause met effect and was denied its spectacle. The city tried to pay her back by tripping her. Private letters appeared in a rival paper, arranged to make her look like a tyrant of Ceylons and a collector of men. Ladies for Civic Relief, the philanthropic board she chaired, voted to suspend her pending clarity. The motion slid under her teacup from the hand of a woman who kissed her cheek while counting votes. "Grace is a finer blade than scandal," Isabela I said. escorting her past the Academy of Music, where dancers were praised for balancing on toes while slowly slicing themselves open. Finer, yes, but still a blade. Isabela II examined the leaks under lamplight. Whoever forged her hand hadn't imitated. He had understood. On page 3, a word betrayed him. She would never have written kindly about a man who threatened a maid. She would have written plainly, and the difference between those two was a theology. That night, a torn ledger sheet surfaced with the persistence of a guilty tide. Payments routed through a trust called Galatea to anonymous telegraph operators. The trustee was hidden behind lawyers. The address was simple: Armitage Rail. She told herself not to run. She walked, spine set to the season, to the brick house on Rittenhouse Square, where the Armitages had built a staircase like a sermon. Julian received her in a library shadowed by leather and illustrated war histories. "Tell me this is a mistake," she said, before saying anything that could not be unsaid. He tasted the ledger page like a wine. "Galatea supplies wire to rural stations," he said mildly. "My father's eyes fail. I sign for him. If I am guilty, it is of trusteeship." "Then show me the warehouse," she replied, and hated the relief that rose in her like basil in fresh earth. Green, lively, unearned. They rode past a churchyard where widows pinned hair into brooches and children chased hoops between stones. The warehouse smelled of tar and honest industry. Wire gleamed. Men with black under their nails doffed caps. The case against him had the wrong music. "Forgive me," she said. "I will apologize until you are bored by my contrition." "I don't bore easily," he answered, and kissed her knuckles with practiced restraint. She did not see the second ledger in a safe upstairs, where Galatea disguised payments to men who loved the sound of a flattering wire more than the truth of it. Later, she watched Julian watch the city at dusk from his balcony, and he showed her the map he carried inside. "I was 9 when the draft riots tried to burn this town into a lesson," he said, voice clean of sentiment. "My father dragged me under a counter while men hammered the door with their anger. I heard girls crying behind the bakery. I smelled tallow and fear. And a priest told the crowd that order was a virtue, and they laughed. I decided I would never kneel to laughter again." He looked at her, eyes steady. "I believe in order because I remember what chaos tastes like, and I will starve chaos if I must." She filed the creed beside the kiss and understood him better and not at all. The conspirator nearest to her heart was not him. He was the banner, handsome, heavy, diverting the eye. The mind behind the wires preferred a cassock to a cravat. Father Ezra Blackwell had baptized her in a church that offered consolation and rules in equal measure. He had taught her Latin and cautions. "The dead improve the living if you guard the living with the rigor death taught you," he liked to say, after cholera took a third of a neighborhood. She remembered him reading to an orphanage on Cherry Street. Lanky boys, girls with skirts hemmed too often. The day she brought bread and a check. He knew each child's name. He corrected a spelling lesson with tenderness, swapped a ribbon for a better one, told a lonely boy that loneliness could be taught to behave. "If the city is a fever," he said softly to her at the door, "we must moderate its heat, yet keep it alive." He sent her a thank you note whose script sang of discipline and mercy in a duet. And then, in another room, he spoke with a donor about lawlessness and the sweet necessity of fear. He could hold a crying child with one hand and light a fuse with the other. Chicago insisted on a spectacle. Near dawn, a bundle placed under a trestle did its arithmetic and found flame. The train lurched, lamps swung, Timbers screamed, a child sobbed in a voice with no word for itself. Isabela II moved through the car's chaos with a dancer's trained instincts. Grip, brace, lift. "You!" a fireman gasped, astonished to see silk and ash in the same sentence. "Belong in a drawing room? So does decency," she said, hauling him to his feet. At the Union Hall, men stared at the apparition of elegance with soot on her collarbone. "We have an hour," she said, setting a crate like a map. In 60 minutes, the provocation becomes an incident, the incident a myth, and the myth a reason to send you to a war you cannot win. And the men who send you won't fight it. "What if war is the point?" a foreman muttered. "Then we disappoint the point," Isabela III said dryly, earning laughter because humor is oxygen when windows won't open. The mint rumor arrived with the inevitability of gravity. Seize the federal mints. Keep coins safe where men of sense can count them. "If you want a nation to scream, take its coins," May said, throwing down slips. "Who sent them?" "That's the part that makes me feel like a girl peering down a well," she muttered. "The orders appear inside the network, as if the wire wrote itself." Julia traced the cipher with a pencil eating itself. "Not military," she murmured. "Ecclesiastical. Quotations. From sermons, the air lost a degree without changing temperature." "Whose sermons?" Isabela I asked. "Father Ezra Blackwell's," Julia said. The room tilted and then righted, because grief is a boat and boats are made to find balance. They baited their trap not in a basement, but under chandeliers. The Armitage Charity Ball for Veterans rebranded compassion into spectacle. Isabela II dressed like an argument against regret. Ivory silk cut to carry decisions, pearls, the black hair brooch pinned where a wound might be. She claimed Julian for the first waltz and felt his palm cooler than ever, his composure like polished stone. "You forgive too easily," he said, as if discussing flowers. "You suspect too little." "I forgive because I expect to pay," she answered. "I suspect because I know the bill is coming." At the turn's apex, when the room rotated like a single educated body, the gas lights hiccuped and brightened. She used the pause the way a surgeon uses silence. "Galatea. Mint car. Ezra," she whispered at his ear. His face forgot its habit. "You don't understand," he said to a universe that lacked the courtesy to share his premise. "Orders without signatures are cowardice," she said. Treasury agents entered with psalmic calm. Men tried to run and discovered they had never learned how to flee without apologizing. Ezra stepped from a side salon, as if he had been carved there by patience. The crowd parted around him because conviction always carries its own aisle. Cassock black enough to drink the light. Pity arranged where argument had aged them both. "My child," he said, and made child seem like vocation, not condescension. "You've put your hands on the table where men haggle for the fate of many." "You didn't ask who cut the wood, whoever cut it," she replied. "Didn't cut it to serve your supper." "I didn't come to dine," he said gently. "I came to cure." The nation is a fever. Sometimes a limb must be broken to be set. Sometimes a fever must be starved. "You brought the church into the mint," she said. "It will not pray as politely as you'd like." Julian tried to bridge them. "Father, your urgency is noise," Ezra answered without looking. "I asked you for silence, not spectacles." "You asked me to tear a seam and let you stitch it," Julian snapped. Then to Isabela too. "You wanted a cause and a crown. Forgive me for recognizing the cause and shaping the crown to fit arrest him," she said, and then, "and him." They caught neither. Ezra had rehearsed the evening from the orchestra's tuning. A servants' corridor embraced him. A hackney without a crest rolled into obliging fog. But the Mint car would not move. She had changed its departure under the name of a clerk who would later enjoy a small scandal and a large pension. May earned her danger that night in a way that dented her life. To reroute the Mint orders, she had masqueraded as a line inspector in the 24th Street substation. Cap low, coil of wire at the hip, palms steady. A rail officer challenged her. She said maintenance, he said authorization, and the exchange turned into a small trial. She darted past him, snapped open the relay case and swapped out the repeater before he got his whistle to his teeth. He dragged her to the floor. She kneed his shin. He called her a slur. She called him a smaller one. Two clerks watched with the alarm of men who wanted to be brave at no personal cost. By the time Isabela's countersign sang through the revised circuit, the officer had arrested May for trespass. The paper fired her to please the railway. The charge was dismissed the next day, but the desk where she had spent 3 years summoning sentences belonged to another man by noon. The reroute held. The Mint car slept. The price came due. Agency had a bill, and she paid it in prospects. Isabela the Eye brought the hair brooch to Isabella Tuque's palm that midnight, as if rearming her. Wear this. Grief focuses the mind. Yours listens to too many rooms at once. Do you think me blind? No. I think you love causes so much you sometimes forget they have faces. They rode hard for the freight yard, horses sweating, breath visible as if the night were writing a letter you could see. The watchman sang to keep awake. Should we stand between a wolf and his lesson? Isabela, I asked, reins firm. Wolves learn from hunger. I won't run a republic on folklore about predators, Isabela II said. If we must be animals, we can at least be the kind that remembers. Midnight at the yard, the Mint car crouched like an iron animal. The telegraph office's window flickered. The operator inside started when Isabela pushed through and took the stool. Do you know the code for confession? She asked, fingers on the key. May and Julia flanked her. The operator took his hat off and learned something about prayer. They announced a departure that would be true and untrue at once. South spur, then west, twice divided, thrice checked. Rope lured into braids. In a tunnel beyond, Ezra knelt with a bundle and a larger idea and listened to the wire sing a counterpoint. You taught her too well, he told the dark, and was not wrong. He moved like a man who took vows seriously, but never promised to be slow. Onto the roof of a mail car, across to the next, lantern at his belt, cloak flattened by wind. The engine groaned into motion. Roof! May shouted, and Isabela climbed. The wind seized her hair. The brooch bit her collarbone, as if memory demanded blood. Ezra turned at the whistle of a shoe on tin. You are out of your parish, he called. I refuse to let you burn cities and call it medicine, she called back. They're not your cities, he answered, and in the injury of that she saw him entire, a man who would amputate anything that refused to resemble the picture in his head. The bend ahead narrowed choice into a lever. Bright with frost, it would decide whether the Mint car met a barricade or a mouth of track. Ezra reached for it. Time shortened its stride. Isabela moved. Short steps, low center, right hand on a rung, left on his sleeve. The wheels screamed. Sparks made brief poems against the dark. He pulled, she held. He gave her the oddest gift, genuine pity. You were always too brave for obedience, he murmured over the wind. And you were always too frightened to be decent without force, she said, and wrenched the lever back. The Mint car slid to the safer line at the wrong speed. The coupling shrieked, Ezra lost his balance, caught a rung, laughed a kind laugh that curdled, and Treasury agents spilled from the next car like nails shaken from a crate. They netted him in arms. He did not fight. He bowed. Morning put iron bars between them and made sunlight look like stripes. "You used my name," she said at the Philadelphia cell. He almost winced. "I used your hunger. My sermons were never your God, purpose was. I did what times require. You interrupted what they insist upon." "No," she replied. "I betrayed what you believed and saved what you pretended was beyond saving." He lowered his eyes. "One of us is wrong. We'll know when our bones are dust." "I'd rather be wrong with mercy than right with graves," she said. The guard took him to a trial already composing its moral, if not its verdict. Consequences arrived in rigid cursive. Ladies for Civic Relief demanded her resignation, not out of disbelief but because controversy upsets seating charts at charity suppers. A Boston committee, alerted by men who disliked women who altered outcomes, summoned her to a hearing in a chamber with marble that liked to imagine itself Rome. In Boston, she faced a half-circle of lawmakers who used courtesy like a truncheon. "You intervened in military signals without authorization," the chairman intoned. "I intervened in crimes disguised as orders," she replied. "The distinction matters if you hope to keep the Union a noun." A young representative asked if she was proud of placing herself above process. She said, "I am proud of placing truth above forgery, and I accept censure if censure is the price." They censured her, formally, beautifully, in phrases that made a punishment sound like a sonnet. Donors in that city withdrew from her projects for a season until their wives reminded them they liked sleeping without sirens. Julian's consequence had less poetry. Fathers with friendships as old as their sins softened his charges to excess of zeal. He offered an apology cut to the size of a cufflink. It glinted, weighed little. She ended him at noon on a corner that had watched older heartbreaks. "Order is not a crown you get to wear over anyone else's breathing," she said, and left him blinking at the precision of daylight. He married 3 years later to a woman who adored order more than breath. He never stopped loving the moment before chaos, when you could still pretend you controlled it. Ezra's flock split the way glass splits, along lines you don't see until they're already cracks. In Baltimore and Boston, prayer halls filled with fasting and arguments. Some parishioners brought soup to federal clerks and learned how to read a seal. Others laced their prayers with threats and found themselves listened to less. A radical subset lit candles not to God, but to inevitability. They wore moral certainty like armor and secretly hoped for wounds to prove the fit. The majority went home, chastened by a man they had admired and wronged by his math. Ezra wrote Isabela once from a cell with a window that watched birds. "I believed you would succeed me. You reminded me mercy is not weakness, and I mistook your mercy for treason. I was wrong about one of us. I cannot afford to learn which." She and Isabela. I burned the letter over a stove. "Truth burns clean," the elder said. They warmed their hands like women making a pact with weather. May found Boston, the same city that censured Isabela, unexpectedly generous. A paper there made her an offer fat enough to buy new boots. She looked back at the desk she had lost and felt nothing she needed to keep. "Do I go?" she asked Isabela II. "We should all go," Isabela said. "Everywhere. Until the map runs out of pins." Julia, blacklisted from one telegraph company for touching a circuit with a woman's hands, opened a backroom school to teach girls dots and dashes. Within a year, 2 rail lines hired her students because talent sometimes bullies etiquette into progress. The price for Isabela too would be paid in installments. Hats did not lift as quickly when she passed, then lifted again once men learned their wives still read May's pieces and their daughters had learned ciphers. She lost a chair, gained a quieter room. She became less beloved in parlors and more necessary in stations. The cartoonist in New York drew her as a flame devouring a banner labeled Scandal. Half the readers saw insult, half a prayer, and both halves bought the paper. She posed for a photograph in a studio on the East Side as a woman who had chosen and lost and would choose again, not as a beauty to be adored. The photographer asked for stillness. She gave him resolve. Silver fixed her and admitted a temporary defeat to time. Because cause and effect wanted to be seen learning, the country offered her 2 small scenes as proof. In a Pennsylvania town, Magistrate Peckham, the same who had almost armed a militia at a counterfeit wire, received a new telegram about a neighbor accused of treason for taking down a rain-soaked flag. He paused, felt the weight of prior almosts, and asked for validation. No arrest. Argument instead. A counterwire from the nearest federal office steadied the room. No blood. In Illinois, Colonel Reed, who had once lined up carbines in his sleep, gathered his men not to march, but to inspect seals and signatures, to rehearse refusal. "We don't move for echoes," he told them. He sent Isabela II a note he had no poet to help him write. Stood down twice. Men still listened. Thanks. Spring unbuttoned the harbor. Fog lifted like a blessing that remembered to be suspicious. She walked past the exchange where the first red envelope had taught her how quickly rumor composes a nation. A clerk leaned out and handed her a wire from Boston. Young women hired at telegraph school. Productivity doubled. Complaints halved. She folded it with the photograph where she refused to pose as anyone but herself. One evening, Isabela Biserge set the hair brooch between them on a parlor table smelling of oranges and coal. "I bargained with Ezra," she said. "Years ago, when hunger made the streets forget their manners, he promised order. I agreed to watch him. I waited too long. Your rage at him belongs to me too." The younger did not blink. "You taught me to look. We'll build what he tried to purchase with fear." The elder nodded, not absolved but enlisted. Their silhouettes made a single figure on the wall until the flame guttered and reminded them they were 2. They returned once more to Chicago to dedicate a home for injured workers that had begun as an emergency and settled into good habit. A child presented a bracelet braided of her late mother's hair. "For luck," she said. Isabela fastened it and felt a line tattoo itself down her soul, the nerve that, when pressed, made her decide. The applause that followed was not the clatter of fashion. It was the slow insistence of people who had survived each other and planned to do so again. At the end of the year, the Treasury published a bland report about safeguards, seals, and signatures. It did not name her. It did not need to. The habits had changed. Men who liked to be important learned to be useful. Women who liked to be useful learned to accept gratitude without apology. Telegraph girls married or didn't. Julia's school took on pupils whose brothers called the course frivolous until their pay packets came home thicker. May's columns in Boston combined bite and fairness. She wrote a piece about Judge Peckham that made him blush and sleep better. On a cold night before spring, Isabela II found herself under the same kind of gas lamps that had witnessed her first step into this work. Their halos trembled like ambition domesticated. She remembered the cut wire, the unsigned order, the moment the country had looked like a patient whose illness was vanity. The harbor clinked with rigging. A carriage wheel hissed. Somewhere a pianist practiced scales with righteous boredom. Isabela the Paint stepped into place beside her, their reflections in a shop window briefly identical and then distinct. "You will be hated again," the elder said calmly, "and doubted, and loved and believed by the right ones," the younger replied. "That will be enough." They stood inside a city that had learned, by inches, to confirm before it burned. The union did not split. It tightened like a belt in a lean year and held. The conspirator closest to her had been the man she had promised to honor, and the man she had promised to love. She had condemned both without drinking the poison of hate. If she lost salons, she gained kitchens and halls, stations and schools, the quieter rooms that decide whether nations are nouns or past tense. If she had suffered public grace wielded as blade, she had answered with proof wielded as rope, not to hang but to tie people to each other. She did not win a crown. She learned to do without one and found it suited her. You have walked with us through these streets and watched an age's gears bite and turn. Carry the story forward. Tell someone convinced that power is a room they can lock, that it is, instead, a light that shows who is standing at the door. And if you would watch again with us, if you'd sit once more in the glow of gas, scandal, and grace, stay, subscribe, pass the word along the wires we share now, and meet us where stories do their best work. At the edge of what almost happened, and the narrow bridge that kept it from becoming all we could talk about.